Hello and welcome to this discussion on technology in the law. My name is Kirsten Maslen. I'm Head of Government and Academic at Thomson Reuters Legal. Thomson Reuters provides information and know-how, such as in Westlaw, Practical Law and Lawtel, and also software solutions to lawyers all around the world. Before my current role, I worked as an editor for Practical Law and I wrote content on predominantly public procurement law. And before that, I was an in-house lawyer in the public sector.
Hello, my name is Charles Christian. I began my career in the legal sector as a barrister many years ago. However, for most of my career, I've been a legal and technology journalist specialising in online legal services and reporting developments in law office automation. I'm the founding editor and publisher of the Legal IT Insider newsletter.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Vestberg. I'm a technologist with an interest in law tech, the founder of Legal Geek. It's the biggest community of law tech startups in the world. We have over 1,000 members and we run events like hackathons and we create some structure around the startup world for organisations to tap into. I'm also here with another hat on. I have a startup called Flex and we place students doing LPC and LLM on demand into law firms to get paid work experience during their studies in an Uberized model.
Hi, I'm Matt Worley. I'm part of a new venture from the Big Four, EY Legal, which is a new law firm being set up by EY in 2014. I'm a legal risk specialist. I'm also not a lawyer. I have spent about 12 years working in the legal profession in knowledge management, operational and risk roles. I've built contract robots, set up a legal risk practice for a city law firm, and now I'm building out legal risk solutions as part of EY Law.
Today we're talking about technology and how it's impacting in the delivery of legal services. So perhaps the best place to start is looking at the drivers for change in the legal profession, which is perhaps not the most innovative industry, but is nonetheless subject to quite significant change at the moment. So perhaps starting with clients and how their expectations have changed. What are clients' priorities when they look for a legal services provider, and how have those changed over time?
I've seen this from both sides actually. Part of my career I spent with a big global bank on the client side, and part of my role there was to work with law firms to improve the value add that they would deliver. So the knowledge services, the free time, the use of secondees to augment our resource. So there's a huge variety of services that we would expect them to give. And I personally put a lot of effort into talking to different departments within the law firm. So talking to the professional service lawyers, talking to the knowledge management know-how teams to explain to them what we expected from them so that we could improve our service delivery to our business. That journey has carried on. Since I left the bank and moved to private practice to the city firm. Actually there's been a greater pressure, mainly driven through costs and through the expectation that if you spend X amounts, you should get a certain amount of value-added services, and through a greater scrutiny from the business on in-house departments, in-house legal departments spend. Because that scrutiny translates into pressure on the law firm side to deliver the same level of service, the same level of risk management, but at a lower cost and more quickly.
The whole point that clients are driving change I think is really interesting. I think it's a bit sad that the legal profession is reactive to the client driving that change rather than innovative first. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a wave of change though where law firms are actually that driving a change is creating a culture of change that law firms are being more innovative. So there's that rise in general counsels. I think the number of lawyers employed in general counsel has doubled since 2000. They're a lot more commercially aware, they're driving a lot of change. But actually when you look at what's happened in America, right down at the kind of high street level where the disruptions happened, it's the commoditized, downloadable legal docs that have really driven a change for efficiency on the high street. And I think like any high street business, that's going to change a lot. So it's happening right across the spectrum, but that innovative culture is now happening. And the legal profession has been slow to innovate, but now it's having to be quick, and you don't have to look far. We have a bit of a crystal ball now, I think, looking at fintech, what's happening in financial services. And you see health tech, and London particularly being a global leader in fintech. That's coming forward to law tech now, I think.
That's a really interesting point about the commoditized end of the legal services market and how that's changed? I mean, would you say that that's really impacting the larger law firms, or is that more the kind of the other end of the market?
It's more the other end of the market, and I think it is worth noting that these changes are not just commercial firms, city firms, it's all the way to the high street. I mean, the example that always strikes me is conveyancing. A lot of law firms, once you're out of London, still work on an old-fashioned 9 till 5, closed at weekends type approach. Most important transaction in your life is buying a house. You can't get the information. The firms that are starting to break away and make an impact are those that are able to offer online portals, online updates. You know, you buy something from Amazon, you can log on at any time, where's my parcel? It can tell you. You can't find out what the status is in buying a new home. And so this whole driver is coming through that way. And we expect now to be able to talk to our lawyer via email, not go down to the high street and make an appointment and see the guy.
And the conveyancing thing, I think the government has almost been a driver in that sense, and the land registry is online, it's digitalised that infrastructure, which is allowing those technologies to come into place in the conveyancing particularly. And it's a volume business, it's a very set process that should lend itself very well to the change and innovation.
Yeah. So yeah, picking up the point about the in-house lawyer and having those legal experts embedded in the client necessarily means that they're demanding perhaps a service in a different way, perhaps being able to disaggregate parts of that service and seeing how different elements of it can be provided in another way.
There's been a lack of innovation and change in the legal profession, I think, generally for the last 100 or so years. And what I've seen actually is that within the in-house legal department, within the clients of the law firms, actually there's a much greater and more urgent need to change and to innovate, because they're at the cutting edge of what the business are expecting. They're at the cutting edge of the budgets and being given greater responsibility for external law firm budgets. And they are in a position now where they can't recruit any more people. They can't spend more on external legal fees because they get questioned on all of those. In my section, financial services, the regulators are scrutinising everything they do. The cost of litigation and expenses is absolutely huge, and they need to find ways of managing the resource that they need for the legal work, but also to use new methods of working out where the risks are, so they can actually decrease the amount of crisis management that they have to pay for.
Perhaps it would be a good time now to talk about the new entrants to the market then and how they're competing with the law firms.
I mean, this is one of the most fascinating aspects. It's almost like the dot-com boom of the 2000 period. There are so many potential new business models out there, and I think the problem a lot of law firms face is they don't want to bet the farm on the wrong business model. You mentioned Uberization earlier. That is a valid concept, and we're seeing people like yourselves coming in from the accountancy side of things. We're seeing all the ABS players in the UK, and we're starting to see more what I'd call legal tech, where you're starting to build a legal business that is looking at, here's technology to deliver it and package it. We don't need to be a traditional law firm. We can deliver the legal services in an entirely different approach.
That disruption, though, is happening more at the high street end of the market. There's a lot of innovative technology you can use at the corporate end, but where you get the disruptive use of that, I get the feeling that's more at the high street end.
I think when you look at other industries, it's often happened at the commodities where the data is, and it's the low end, but volume and efficiencies can drive it. I think the lawyers on demand model that law firms have adapted to general counsels with more flexible resources supplying lawyers is disruptive in its own way. It may not be as tech-led as it could be, but it is a more flexible reaction from law firms, so there are opportunities to not necessarily work in a law firm, become a consultant earlier in your career than there could have been before.
So I think, see that as disrupting the market?
I see that as adapting to the market rather than disrupting. I see disruption in the way law firms are operating now. You don't need thousands of paralegals in basements reading documents. There's the AI piece, the digitalization of documents, which is disrupting the way law firms are operating. in that, and it's that kind of career path where the trainee is, some law firms are adapting different strategies around that. They're either having more trainees or less trainees and different structures within the firms. I think it may not be disruptive, and the word disruption is a dangerous one to bandy around.
It does mean, though, that the legal service is concentrated at the kind of high quality end in the law firm in terms of, perhaps before, I think we've probably, seen trainees or newly qualified spending a lot of time reviewing documents, perhaps even photocopying and things like that. That kind of process work may not even be done in the law firm anymore. It might be offshored, it might be delivered by a completely separate organisation. So I think in that sense, we are seeing the sort of standard set of activities that a lawyer would need to deliver a particular transactional piece of litigation being chopped up and delivered by different delivery partners, not retained by the law firm.
And that's often something I hear from lawyers when we talk about AI, and it's saying, it's a rite of passage to become a lawyer, to do that work so you understand it. And my point is, I don't think you necessarily become a better lawyer by doing that work at all.
There's a balance though, right? Yeah. Because you need to do the work to a degree to become good at it. And I'm not sure we know quite how many hours. So we know to be an expert, I was listening to a report about Roger Federer, and you have to do the 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at anything. I don't think it's 10,000 hours of reading documents to become an expert, but we need to have a better understanding about what new lawyers coming through have to do in order to become expert, and have a better level of testing possibly within the firm, a better level of competency testing at the different skills, rather than just assume that they spent 6 months on a seat so they know everything they need to know.
And the technology should enable that, and it should pull out elements and clauses that should make that job more efficient, because any human element is liable to risk, especially if they're working long hours.
And I think also the lawyer will presumably get, we're talking here, aren't we, about the machines that can identify and highlight risk and then present those to the lawyer to then take a view or advise further. So the lawyer is bringing their expertise to bear in terms of how they translate those results into legal advice to the client, which is where the real skill is.
I think one of the things is that this focus on documents, and you've got to spend all this time sifting through them, it's actually quite a relatively recent innovation in law, because it's not that long ago we didn't have photocopiers and we didn't have the profusion of documents, we didn't have email and the profusion of documents. Part of it is technology has created this monster of huge volumes of paperwork that have got to be sifted through. But there's no actual legal element in that, it's just sorting it through, and that can be handled by technology. Absolutely. I think the issue is getting lawyers to put their hands in their pocket and invest in these technologies, rather than to say, we've always done it this way.
And they've built very successful businesses doing it that way.
Well, this is always the argument. How do you tell a room full of millionaires that they're running the wrong business model?
That brings us neatly on to the next issue for discussion, which is looking at specific technologies and how they're being used by legal services providers and what difference they're making. And I think probably the first one we should mention is artificial intelligence, which is obviously creating a big noise in the legal services market. What do we mean by that? And how is artificial intelligence being used by law firms to deliver a better service, perhaps?
I'm a bit of a cynic, because AI has suddenly become the go faster stripe, that everything has got AI in it. And in fact, it's machine learning, and it's OCR, it's technology that's 20 years plus old. And it's, to go back to the point I made earlier, the difference now is firms are realizing they're under more competitive pressure, and they are prepared to invest in these technologies, whereas previously it was actually cheaper to have a lot of trainees sift the documents. And I think that's one of the big changes we're seeing, that at long last the technologies out there are being embraced and invested in and exploited.
I completely agree. I think that's a really good point.
I think there's been a marked improvement in some of the technology, though, since 2014. And I think when we talk about AI, just to answer your first question, actually that's more really, really clever search. There's a branch that's talking about searching through documents and making decisions based on them in the courts, and you're going to get robot judges that are sort of so far away that you can almost just discount that. But if you just look at the core activity of reading and extracting data from documents, reporting that to a more experienced lawyer, that is really, that's heavily augmented search, and there's an element of intelligence in there where the engine learns from previous searches, what's good, what isn't, what data you want to get from a document, what you don't, whether the data you get is good or not, is what you're looking for. So there's an element of learning in there that you can argue is right at the lower end of artificial intelligence.
Could you give us an example of that, of how that is used currently in law firms?
So it's used patchily. I mean, it's only 2014 was 2 years ago, right? So, and it takes a long time, as we were saying before, for a law firm to embrace new technology, work out how to implement it, and then start to get value from that. But I built a robot to read through basic legal documents, extract key data points, put them into a spreadsheet, do cross-checks with external databases, deduplicate things, basically do a lot of processing to that, and it would do 2 weeks' work in 2 seconds. But 2 weeks of the worst sort of work that you just would not want to do, right? It's the dog end of legal work, the stuff that you get the machines to do.
You're seeing that in e-discovery systems as well, that are being used for that when you're going through millions of, potentially millions of pages of paper in Outlook files and things, just to sift through and sort. These are the key emails, and these are the bits you want, and these are merely just the duplicates.
Which is the essence of the technology solving a problem that was created by the technology that helped you to create so many documents that now there are too many for you to physically read through. It's almost the same as there is so much law being written and so much regulation being written, there's too much for you to read through, so you need a technology solution for that as well. But the AI stuff, actually there is genuine AI technology out there in the market that can make huge improvements to the working life of junior lawyers, as well as to the time and the money that you have to spend to do the actual document review. And if you can target it at specific areas of work and deliver huge productivity improvements, I mean, you don't have to ask people to stay through the weekend anymore.
I was going to say, it's partly being driven though by the clients who are saying, look, there's technology out here that can do it. Why have we got this enormous bill? Because you've had a basement full of law students and trainees sifting through the paperwork.
I think that's the evolution of AI. I think AI is the whole problem with AI is the word AI, and it's moved on now from the futurists talking about it and talking about it in the sense that here's a picture of a robot and this is what a lawyer is going to be, and that's selling the fear, which has been a really bad way to sell AI into law firms, to now it practically being used in a positive way, and we focus more on features and benefits, and it's here now. It's live, and it makes lawyers' lives better. And that's the key difference, and that's where we are now at the point, and it is easy to sell, but it is selling in as a technologist into a law firm, you're looking at a 6 to 12 month sales cycle. Because it's so hard to sell into law firms, it's why technology costs so much, and because there are so many legacy systems to integrate in with, it's very, very difficult. I mean, new entrants maybe have a flatter approach or blanker sheet of paper to approach that, and that's maybe where you can capitalise on these things better. But when you're looking at the landscape, it's very difficult to actually sell in.
And why is that? Is that because lawyers think that what they do is inherently unique and can't be systematised, or is it more about, as you said, practical issues such as integration with other systems?
Yeah, I think there's a strong culture that we've touched on already of resistance to change. People are still dictating to secretaries and being righted up. So it's almost like gone from a paper world to a digital world with a massive handhold that still exists. Now is the time where it's changing, and it will be interesting for students going forward to enter the market at this stage. I do genuinely think the landscape is going to change a lot in the next 5 years. And it's going to be particularly in the UK, where we have ABS and these rules coming through.
Law firms have traditionally been very resistant to spending money on technology. They tend to regard it as a back office overhead, and because many of them have spent huge amounts of money on endlessly replacing word processing systems, endlessly replacing practice management accounting systems. And so it's only relatively recently that the technologies are starting to impact on the lawyering, the bit that the lawyers do, as opposed to the back office administration. And I think that's a bit of a culture change, that it's technology, and I think the element of disruption is some firms are getting this and are investing in them, others are resistant.
And I think it was a marketing play for a while to use to speak to clients about AI, but now it's actually coming through and being used, but it's taking a while.
So we've talked about the AI or machine learning, really, technology-assisted review. We've mentioned e-discovery, the ability of these systems to scan hundreds of thousands, even millions of documents, and to be able to perhaps highlight those that present a risk, so that the lawyer can then make a more informed decision or provide more informed advice. But we've talked really about how we're saving the junior lawyer's time and therefore providing a cheaper bill for the client at the end. But what about a better service for the client? What about technology that's enabling law firms to really embed their knowledge of that client and their knowledge of previous transactions or previous litigation, and then leveraging that to provide a better service? Is there anything we can say about that kind of technology?
The same technology can be applied to do exactly that, to learn from previously negotiated contracts for a particular client, what their preferred position is and what the preferred position of the people they've negotiated against is, so that you can shortcut negotiation process. To say, well, actually, we know that this client has accepted this term 20 times in the last 2 years, so why are we negotiating it with you now? There's just no point. I mean, a lot of law firm client relationships are based on the fact that you've done their business for 20 years, so you know what they want and you know their business better than they know it themselves.
Yeah.
So huge stickiness for clients. So there's definitely those sorts of applications.
Yeah.
For the AI-based stuff, I mean, there's lots of other technology you could talk about that's used in other sectors that would help to improve, client service and delivery. Tracking, parcel tracking is something I was talking about the other day. If you could have a parcel tracking but for a matter, so you could log on and see where your legal matter was with the law firm and who was working on what. And
They exist.
They exist.
They're case management portals.
Yeah,
that's
but
what
they're
the
not
volume people are
ubiquitous
doing.
in the market. Certainly in our end of the market.
Not in that's at the big end of the market, but
Yeah.
the volume end, that they've been the order of the day for
And I describe
decades. The big
space-
factories.
The space I described that we're in the law tech space, is a bit of an Ask Jeeves phase. So these technologies exist. Like Ask Jeeves explained to people what a search engine was in a really nice way. Google came along and did a better search engine. And I think that those things exist, but by their nature, they're not succeeded yet because not everyone's using them. So there's a big opportunity there. And a lot of the challenges we have as technologists is selling at the moment that cultural difference to explain to people, actually, we talked about email earlier, but really in the tech space, we don't use email, we use Slack, we use live chat, and students coming through will be more familiar with WhatsApp probably, or Snapchat, than they will with email. And the younger generation, forgetting law students, are not using email, they're using email to register on things, but that's it. And that's going to come through to clients, and you see these technologies like WhatsApp for business coming through, Facebook chat for business. That stuff is going to come and affect the legal profession for sure.
If you are a student going to work in a law firm, you are going to need traditional law office skills. You are going to need to be able to deal with Outlook. Most law firms, the desktop is Outlook. You are going to need those skills. You're also going to need Word, Excel, Adobe, boring office skills.
But just even in Word though, you specifically need to know how to use Word styles and headings.
Yeah.
And I've probably count on one hand the number of lawyers that I know, and I've met hundreds who actually know how to apply a Word style to a document. They just manually format everything and then chuck it off to the secretarial pool to fix it out. And then they re-manually format everything. So at least it's... Anyway, that's my technical author background coming out, but I just find it horrifying that that's not basic skills.
Can I mention the LTC4 initiative? This is driven by initially a general counsel with Kia in the US, and he did research on his legal bills, and he was appalled that lawyers were charging large amounts of money for relatively routine admin jobs, a document to be sent over, and it would take a long time and a huge bill would come back. So he drew up a little test of basic skills, and it was Outlook, Word, Excel, and Adobe, nothing very sophisticated. And he reckoned that it would take half an hour to do it. And he sent it out to all the counsel, all the law firms that Kia used, and they found the average time was 5 hours and the longest time was 8 hours. So he's started this movement in the US, and it's now picking up in the UK, called the Legal Technology Core Competencies Certification Consortium, LTC4. And it is pushing these basic office skills, because it's saying, we're not going to pay you for 8 hours of a lawyer's time when they could have done it in half an hour. So I say these skills are important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what we're sending paralegals in that are law students into law firms, and the main thing we're getting fed back is we want commercial skills, business skills, anything. And that's a thing that you can't get from reading books. It is a key area that's missing with a lot of students coming through going into the profession.
Let's unpack that a bit about, because that's one of those things that students are always asked to demonstrate their commercial awareness, and I think their tech skills are, like their legal knowledge, supposed to be really taken as a given. But actually, perhaps we could give a bit of guidance on that point. What tech skills do we expect students to be able to demonstrate when they start in a firm, and what business skills should they demonstrate, considering that many of them will not have had full-time work?
One of the issues in a law firm is they have their own discrete systems, which you learn about when you join them. What system they use for document management, what system do they use for time and billing, etc. And until you actually get in the firm, you're not really going to know that, and you'll do that on your induction. But I think just general keyboard competency, the understanding that you can work mobile. I mean, this is another trend. Increasingly, lawyers are working at the client's offices, taking a laptop with them or a tablet with them, and being able to work and function there, as opposed to take notes, take it back to the office where it's then typed up and transcribed and sent back again. So I think just a general, business technology skills.
If I had my way in a law firm about what I wanted students or new lawyers to have, it would be the ability to just create templates and to reuse a template rather than start every document from scratch. The ability to use styles, have a spreadsheet set up with the formulas in there so you can put information in, generate reports, the ability to combine those two into a PowerPoint deck using the right slide format and not have to start everything again and spend like 5 days creating a PowerPoint deck and then expect the client to pay for 4.5 of those. I mean, you would want just some of those common skills. I'm not sure whether that you would expect that from day one. I think you would have to learn that through your training contract and have more productivity based, not really technology focused, but productivity focused training and actually start to engage lawyers at all levels. And how can you do this quicker? What tools do we have that can be applied to that problem and start to create some solutions that strip unnecessary time out of legal work?
We addressed this specific problem with our paralegal business. We realised that everyone was asking for commercial skills. Well, how do you get commercial skills if you don't have them? So we placed them into pro bono work first. So they're working in law centres across London or shelter charities that have general counsels, get some experience, and then from there leveraging that into the next stage. And I think that's a really great opportunity. All the law schools have pro bono teams, and it shows a willingness as well to do things. And then you can also get commercial skills from working in banks, etc. That are not even necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be legal to get you up the next run. I think you can be very focused, competing like for like with your students and having those skills. They're cross vertical. You already have the law background, just get the commercial background.
That's an excellent idea, because I mean, one of the things that first horrified me when I was first in practice is, of course, you go through law school and you have, this is contract law, this is tort, etc. But when you actually meet a client, they don't say, oh, I've got a contract problem. They say, I've got this dispute or I'm having a row, and you have to work out what it is. And working in a law centre, which I've done as well, you get that and you work it out. It's a landlord and tenant dispute. It's not this at all. It's that ability to distill what is the issue from a whole mass of extraneous rants and rages. That's what you've got to do.
And that's the skill that people pay for when they engage a lawyer, right?
Yes.
Is to work out exactly what their problem is and then apply a legal fix.
Yes.
That's the skill that you want from your lawyers.
Yes.
With all of the technology stuff, it's all about giving them the best opportunity to make those decisions and to be with the client and engage in those and to deliver it.
I think one point I would probably make is, and the thing that I found most difficult when I started my training, is the ability to understand both how the law firm works as a business and how your what your client's drivers are. You know the law, but it is, what is my role within this business? And actually, I think this new sort of move to process map everything, down to quite a granular level. Obviously, clients are demanding their quotes are similarly broken down. Actually, it's very helpful to the junior lawyer because they can see very clearly the process of a transaction, where their role is along that line, and then perhaps identify new ways of doing things.
I think there's a huge expectation gap between what firms expect from young people coming to work in their business, because they've got this whole millennial aura about them, and what those poor 21-year-old people can actually deliver.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge gap, and we need to look more at, well, how can we use technology to help them to be better prepared for the workplace? And I was thinking on the way through, so LinkedIn. If they were taught how to use LinkedIn and connect to law firms and connect to clients, connect to potential clients, join discussion groups, how is employment law being practiced for real? Join something and engage in conversation sensibly and ask questions in a relatively safe, albeit public environment, and get answers and start to engage that. You can actually start to build those commercial skills. It's the same as getting onto Jimmy's paralegal placement scheme, which is again technologically enabled, presumably to match people with opportunities. There's a lot that you can do now to build up that commercial awareness before you get to the law firm, where actually what you then need to do is learn how to work within that law firm in a way that doesn't get you fired. Or helps you to succeed. But there's such a huge weight of expectation, I think, on these poor people coming through.
It is a business world, and it's, as you say, it's problem solving, and the law may be actually a very, very small part of it that's needed. It's sorting it out, and in some instances just applying common sense to it.
Which I think is another reason that you see the innovation coming from the in-house world.
Yes.
Because they're at the cutting edge of that business side. They see how small a portion the law is, and they advise on far more than just the law to their business. And they pass that back through, it gets filtered through to the private practice firms.
I think the other thing with in-house is they are constrained by budgets, and they will take a view that in some instances it may actually be the cheaper, beneficial for shareholders to just settle a deal and finish it off and get rid of it, rather than fight it through to the House of Lords and take it to the highest level, because it's just not worth it. The business argument is we'll just cut it and settle.
I think if we're going to be generous enough to call law firms business models, we have to look at actually what it is, and the core of it is it's a business model based on inefficiency versus the general counsel, where there is that efficiency. And the more inefficient you are, the more billable hours you are. And I think one of the challenges I see for law firms is if their targets are so focused on the billable hour and they're not being efficient and they're billing more, the clients are just not going to stick around anymore. And the points you made earlier, I think, are really relevant to that with the technology. I don't mind actually the billable hour if it's efficiently employed and if they're using technology. But if they're taking 8 hours, 9 hours to open Word and edit a document, I'm not happy as a client. And it's completely reasonable now to tender to different law firms to get different quotes, and they could be those elements to like technology you're using are key points to that.
I mean, in my journalism days, a number of times I've encountered law firms saying, why should we be invested in this technology which allows us to do a job in 2 hours where previously it took us 8 hours? Why should we throw away 6 hours of billable time? And you try and say, well, it's profits you should be doing, not turnover anyway, and you could do something else in those extra saved hours and maybe go home early,
On recent experience, at least that attitude is evolving. So that's less prevalent than it used to be.
What opportunities do we see for the lawyers of the future in terms of new roles or perhaps different opportunities to work in other legal services providers beyond the traditional law firms?
I think it's quite an exciting landscape, actually. I think if I was getting a law degree now, for all of the doom-mongering around there's going to be no jobs because the robots are going to do them all, I said, actually, the robots doing all the stuff that would means I would never want to be a lawyer. So you can learn, pick up the job more quickly. You can move in-house at an earlier age. earlier stage in your career, it's more acceptable to do it. I mean, with a 2-year PQE is an acceptable point now. As it used to be something like 8.
Newly qualifieds can go in-house quite
you're getting
easily.
Trainee contracts with some of the big corporates, big financial services. You've got technology startups to go and advise on the law. There are a huge number of different ways of working within the legal sector that don't necessarily require you to have a legal practicing certificate and a 2-year training contract. I think there's a growing, just as the work gets disaggregated by the client, there's a growing acceptance that within a law firm you need a different set of skills, an increasing acceptance, project management, technology, process mapping, different skills that you can apply to a business that actually, I don't know whether they were there 15 years ago.
Yes.
You used to think a lawyer, you have to be a lawyer to do anything.
Yes, it used to be. If you can't get a job with a law firm, well, you're finished in law type of thing. You can't get a training contract. But I'd say the whole market is opening up. And I think as well, we touched on earlier, the fact that more and more parts of the legal process are being split off. They no longer necessarily have to be done within the law firm. There are all these supply companies out there, legal process companies, that are a piece of the whole legal scheme where you can have a career in there. And I think the other point again, which we picked up on, you brought up, is that working in-house is no longer regarded as being a little bit second class now, very much. That is where there's a lot of interesting shift of control
from the firm.
And that would probably be a way to look. I'd say, I take your point. It's an exciting time to be in the market.
And just flying the flag for the law tech space, I think it's a great opportunity now. A lot of students, a lot of lawyers, a lot of startups I've seen in the legal space, in London particularly, are 1 or 2 years into practice, realise there's an opportunity with a bit of commercial experience, and then actually leaving and saying, I'm going to do a startup. We have a huge skill set by being a lawyer, even just having training as a student, and we see, I'd say, 90% of the startups have a law background student, so we're recruiting for those, even if it's just a business development role, which is huge commercial skills to then go and continue your career as a lawyer. I think you're much more employable. And there's a lot of money around right now for law startups. If anyone has an idea, I'd really encourage them to look at it. I also think it's really interesting, and these stats may be slightly wrong, but the stats as I understand it, 60% of law students are women, but 30% of partners are women. So there's we have a working group around that, Women in Law Tech. And I think and that's not a gender specific group either, there's men and women there to discuss how to improve that. And I think it's a huge opportunity for the women who are already leaving law to actually get involved in technology and startups. So I think it's great, to echo your points, I think it's a great time to be entering law. It's a really positive thing.
So I need to fly the flag for risk management as well. I'm here, I run a legal risk practice, so it's one of the new areas in the law, is helping clients to work out where their business operations interact with law and regulation in a way that can cause loss. It's a completely different skill set to being a practicing transactional lawyer. It's applying operational risk with a knowledge of the law to work out what might go wrong, do scenario planning. There'll be a huge number of opportunities just in legal risk management. People who have a law degree cross-train over into risk, spend time with private practice, in-house teams, just to help to map out the landscape and work out where they can prevent issues from happening, which is just as a much better way of reducing legal spend rather than just pushing law firms on costs.
Yeah, it's the having the barrier at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a fascinating area which we didn't really get. I should fly the flag for legal knowledge managers, of course. And obviously we have a large number of lawyers that work for Thomson Reuters, writing content, pulling out key points of cases. What do people need to know and why? Looking at software solutions for lawyers as well. Another big business that employs a lot of lawyers. It's exciting. What advice would we give then to law students embarking on the legal profession? What advice can we give them in terms of keeping up to date with changes? I guess perhaps my biggest piece of advice would be to keep an open mind. There are all sorts of interesting careers out there. The industry is changing a lot. You'll need to be adaptable, probably above all else.
Yes.
What other piece of advice might we give?
Network. I think network. I'm LinkedIn as a business networking tool is used by everybody. So get on LinkedIn, where you meet people on placements, where you meet people at drinks or at recruitment fairs. You connect to them, join their discussion groups, try and engage as much as you can, even if it's just as a lurker in those discussion groups and those forums, and learn what people are talking about in the industry that you want to join, just as a way of being able to answer those ridiculously difficult interview questions. Where do you think the firm should be in 5 years' time?
Yeah, it's all about relationships, and if you have relationships, you're personable, they're the people who are going to do well in a career, I think, forgetting anything else. I built a network predominantly on Twitter, actually, and that's how I got connected with Thomson Reuters for the first time, and that was through 3 introductions from my first introduction when I was in San Francisco, and that was a very senior person at Thomson Reuters. So it's amazing. It's just the openness, your first point is absolutely right, and the openness to network and meet people and go for coffee and have interesting stuff to talk about. And there is a kind of, which is a bit of there is a thing where you're younger, you should know technology, but like if there are opportunities like that for you to educate and change, I think the biggest innovation at a law firm is a cultural innovation rather than a technology one, because actually the tech is there, and if you can help partners who are really open to it as well and connect them up, I think that would be a really good career progression piece, because you're well placed to do that potentially. Play those stereotypes to your advantage.
I think also being prepared to reinvent yourself and not take the view, I've left law school, I've got my training contract, I'm going to be in this law firm, and after so many years I'll make partner and whatever. That type of career progression is probably a thing of the past. You are going to be jumping around, you're going to be seeing new opportunities, you're going to be seeing the market change. To be prepared to jump and follow new exciting opportunities, rather than just think, that's it, I'm here, got my feet under the desk, that's me done till retirement. That's not the way of the world anymore. The firm you're in may not be there in 5 years' time, even if it's a large firm. But be prepared to reinvent yourself and keep moving on.
I find it actually, on that point, really interesting that some of the people I speak to who are at the associate level, they're 30, I think they'd be really embracing this stuff that we do, the technology stuff, and they say to me, oh Jimmy, you don't get it, that's the way it is. And that's kind of that, I think the openness is really important, because you can be whatever, some firms, I don't know how it happens, but you seem to maybe go in open but then become like, this is the way it is, and channel down that route, but it really isn't like that, and it isn't a futurist. You've got a long time ahead of you if you want to have a career in the space, and if you're being told that that's the way it is, I'd really question those motives.
I think, that was probably the point I was making about the newcomers seeing things afresh, because you do get quite embedded in an organisation and its systems and processes, and actually, it is valuable to have another pair of eyes looking at.
There are some incredibly innovative, forward-thinking 30-year-old senior associates that don't have time to do anything with their ideas, because they have to bill more hours in a working week than they should work in a week. So they don't have time to follow through on it. So it's really hard. It's another barrier to innovation and change, is you need to have time and space to do that.
And that's a cultural thing again, isn't it? The firm making the space. And,
It's all culture and people and change, but it's the culture and people thing that makes law firms unique in their way of operating. And yes, you can have all this wonderful technology there, but if you've got the wrong culture and the wrong people, it's never going to be realised.
Technology will never drive change, it just enables it. It's something, it's there, it's been there to use for many, many years. It's getting better because technologists are making it better, but it will only change your law firm or your career if you choose to enable it to do so.
Well, that brings us to the end of the discussion. I hope you found that interesting. We've scampered through the changes that are impacting on law firms and perhaps where those changes are coming from, how client expectations have increased, or clients have become more demanding, about how that's led to the commoditisation of certain elements of the legal service at one end of the market, and how other law firms are using technology to deliver services in a different way by reducing waste essentially in the system and inefficient processes, and freeing lawyers up to do what they really want to do, which is to add the value. We've also talked a bit about where we see the opportunities for lawyers entering the profession, and hope you're excited by those opportunities. And we've also discussed a bit about skills and what we think new lawyers should perhaps be focusing on when they join their firm. So thank you very much for watching. That brings us to the end.